The gift of the Godhead.
Good morning. Oh, do you bring the menses report?
He closed the door and nodded with the folder in the air.
Who delivered it? Did you catch sight of him?
No, must have been earlier.
His associate looked out from her desk through the window at the landscape, clad in fog and still graced by the morning dew.
Gods, suppose they sleep during the day. Let's have a peek, shall we?
He twirled open the string that kept the folder intact, and the stool on which his associate sat upon screeched along the floor as she stood.
Don't get your hopes up, mate. Oh, I haven't. This week will be as droll as the last.
They both shared in a contemptuous snigger. In only a short time of reading and seeing the length of the document, his anticipation was confirmed.
So? Well, list of new applicants, construction fees. I'll skip the logistic part, will you? What are they up to? A list here tells me they have been rummaging around in the hill recently.
His associate chuckled and shook her head.
If only they knew about Is. Let's see. More or less resumed increase.
He frowned.
Then they have details on something they call lead elixir. What's that? Some kind of experimental byproduct they concocted. Supposed to have drastic physical effects on the body quickly upon consumption. But say they are testing it further. Oh, sod it. That sounded interesting. Indeed. At least they are hard at work with brewing dubious concoctions. Quite right.
Beside the door stood a doctor, lining up all his tools on a tray for later. Another stood beside him, putting on a long apron. They turned and nodded at Weldmere as he came sauntering towards them. "Is the patient inside?" he asked, and they nodded again. He headed through the door into a neat little room with several tall windows on the wall end. The operating room was furnished more like any doctor's office, with a desk, 2 chairs, a mostly empty shelf, and a potted flower in the window. Sitting on a bed was a man in a patient's garb. His hair, both in his face and on his head, was a bit unkempt, but not terribly so. He turned his chin up a bit scornfully when he saw him. "Good day and God bless, sir. How are we feeling?" He wrinkled his nose, but had a look of nervousness in his eyes as he peered over the room. "How long will this take?" "Not long. It will just feel like stepping into bed after a hard day's work. Uh-huh. And, how long will I be out? Oh, for as long as the goddess thinks fitting. But I can assure you, it won't be a bore. He looked over the floor with darting eyes, then lay down fully. Yes, naturally. May I ask, good cleric, about the reward? Oh, the reward will be plentiful and splendorous, indeed. Yes, but when... Now, sweep those thoughts away for the moment. Dedicate your facilities, just a short moment, to the fair maiden. Pay her the respect she is due for the coming reward. He nodded. The nurse handed him the vial of blue elixir. Everything in order? The man nodded and tilted his head up when the lid was removed. He swiftly gulped down the slightly luminescent liquid before laying his head back, folding his hands over his chest, and adjusted himself a bit. There we are. Weldmere spoke much lower and put on his soothing voice. Tell me, would you, when you start to feel something, anything at all? The man lay still a moment longer, appearing ordinary. At first his eyelids began to droop. Then he started caressing the surface of his left hand with his right middle finger. He muttered something incoherently. Weldmere smiled greatly, feeling a delightful joy overcome him. Rapturous, isn't it? The man nodded slowly. Yes, it is very. This is the goddess Grace. She is within you now. Don't you want to become what she wants you to? Or can I? It is, after all, your reward. She's giving it onto you. You just have to accept it. His hazy eyes became clear, flickering with light as he looked straight into the ceiling, smiling greatly. Then I will. Oh, I most certainly will. He nodded to the nurse, who went over to the desk. There she plucked out one of the little invertebrate cocoons from the Lumenwood garden and put it on a platter. Then she went over to the door and peeked outside, which prompted the two doctors to enter. The patient did not seem to take notice of any of the activity. The two doctors stood behind his head. The nurse came in with a trolley of tools they had previously prepared. Scalpels, needles, prongs and otherwise. One of them grabbed a scalpel and poked straight into the head of the patient, seemingly at random. It did not break the state of bliss dominating the man. Very good. Now shut your eyes. Pray and wait. It will come at any moment. He clasped his hands together in prayer and closed his eyes, while the doctor started making the initial carving at the front of his scalp to gain access to the brain. Upon approaching the door, he heard a bit of a commotion inside. One voice in rambling despair, while another more basal tried to calm him. He hurried inside and found a young man in a state of trying to get off the operating table, but appeared incredibly conflicted about it. Both he and the nurse became more still as they saw him enter. He was quick to approach the red-eyed man. "Oh, my good man, whatever is the matter?" he said in a low, calming voice.
It's all wrong. I can't do this.
But what makes you say that?
This is not proper communion. I hate doctors. Pardon me, but I want no part of this.
Oh, you must misunderstand. The process requires specific administration to make the sensation possible. I know it must seem oh so strange. But let's be brave now, shall we? Together, for the fair maiden. The man shook his head. Waldemar could not help but bite his lip from frustration. Oh? What exactly seems to be the problem,
That thing.
He pointed to the vial of blue elixir.
I don't know what that is. It frightens me. Why isn't it a normal blood administration? How could there be a communion with that?
He had retained his apprehensive timidness, which further played on his nerves. Well, this is not a common communion. The church has several means of prayer involving divine mediums. This will lull you into a sleep, where the fair maiden will enter your dreams.
I don't...
He raised his voice before calming himself with a deep breath.
I don't want to dream. I would prefer to be awake.
His breath quivered, and he looked over at the nurse. Restrain him.
What?
In the same moment that his utterance was spoken, Waldemar had shoved his forearm into the patient's throat to shove him down onto the table surface. The man started to struggle while gasping for breath. His heart began to beat furiously, his forehead dampened with sweat, and his hands trembled furiously. He hated seeing that face of despair upon him, and had to see it replaced with a serene expression wrought by the touch of grace. He fumbled with the leather restraint in the table and tried to grab at the flailing arms. The nurse stood on the other side to hold him down.
Now you need to calm down, sir. This is not just for your own good, but the people's. It is only a tiny bit scary to see the magnificent divine, but I will give you relief. I don't blame you for not seeing. You soon will. I don't care! Shush now. The meek always despair in the shadow of God. I implore you to step out from it. See its radiance.
They managed to swiftly tie his hands down, then moved on to his feet.
Answer me this, sir. Do you remember your blessed mother forcing medicine into you?
Her response was not discerned within his struggle.
In the face of a goddess, we must remain humble souls, and not petulant children. Now, I assure you, this is not as evil as you perceive it.
Mayhew was sitting in a chair, casually leaned back and looking up into the ceiling as he was fiddling with a ring between his fingers. There was always a pleasant ringing in his ear. A low gentle tone, like if a beautiful singing voice was caught in one note. It was low enough for him to sometimes forget it was there, but would often make his mind wander in the most intriguing directions. While he was working, he suddenly had ideas that provided solutions. While others of his colleagues thought he was an amazing and cunning man for leading them to such success, he could not even feel humbled by their praise. He knew it was the goddess humming in his ear, urging him and nudging his thoughts along. But something had slowly, over time, started to distinguish itself within, that made his eyes narrow each time he tried to define it. Something with the tone gave him a certain impression, but for the life of him could not figure out what. While he was listening to the tone in the quiet office, someone had suddenly entered and now stood beside him. Goodness me! Pardon, Master Mayhew, but I was knocking. We have the new bell ready for inspection. Oh, very good. Let's see then. He arose and followed the man outside into the grand laboratory hall. It was quite loud in the echoing space, with several tables and choir researchers moving in between them, as well as working with focus all around the room. He was a bit surprised at how quiet it had been just earlier, with just a door separating him from the ruckus. He was led to one of the corners of the room, where a little workshop area dominated it, with a table possessing several small shelves and drawers. At its end was a miniature smelter and crucible for crafting of jewelry, and other small-scale metallurgy. A gathering of researchers turned upon his arrival and awaited in anticipation, examining as one of them presented a little ornate hand bell. Mayhew gave a nod, and the bell was rung. While the clanging stilled, he looked up to the side, but it did not harmonize properly.
No. Too high.
Truly?
I dare say we cannot make it lower. Use another material. Whatever it takes. Just listen to the emissaries.
They looked between each other, delaying their answer long enough for him to lose patience and start to meander back to his office.
Oh, but Master Mayhew, the last craftsman, he has expired.
Huh? What is that?
Well, too many phantasms.
He looked in between them all with a nullified expression.
When? He was laid to rest in the garden just this morning. Oh my. Unfortunate.
With a sound in his ears, he started walking with the hands behind his back towards the laboratory exit. Only when he emerged into the garden did he recognize that most of the researchers had followed him. Out there, the sound was no longer sounding in solitude. It was an orchestra. As if all the upturned lumenwood flowers were trumpets and the celestial emissaries, the choir of voices. Like the flowers, their enlarged, blue, starry heads were turned up to the sky. Mostly their emaciated forms stood idle, swaying from side to side, sometimes raising their hands to the heavens, but they could also be seen meandering about in between the tall flowers. One could be observed crawling its way up from beneath the dirt, entangled with the roots of one of the flowers, like a grotesque primal infant. He let out a pleased sigh, as it truly was a heavenly experience he would never tire of. Yet there was one specific quality to it all that he very much would want to define. While it was still part of what made it so beautiful, it was a bit vexing that it so plainly felt like it had some meaning. But how does one put into words what is only heard in music?
Why ever someone would hesitate to live this experience?
He said lowly, like his voice would disturb the musicians.
One day, when our work is done, I can truly see myself among the true choir of heaven, conducted by the illustrious and fair Maiden Ebrietas.
Eduarda knocked on the door. When she looked back towards the dusky street past Edgar, he too turned his head. At the window beside the door, she caught movement at the edge of the curtain. There was a shuffle inside, before a voice came from beyond.
Yes? Who is it? Church errands. I would just like to ask a question or two. About what? Just some directions.
The door opened up slowly, revealing a middle-aged woman peering out timidly at her.
A good evening, miss. I was just heading down the street here.
She motioned to her right. The woman peeked out carefully to better see.
My business regards the hunt, you see. I was just going to meet up with some of my companions. However, I believe I might have taken a wrong turn. Isn't the Elden chapel this way?
The woman raised one eyebrow, examining her from top to toe.
Oh, you a hunter?
She asked in a respectful tone.
Church agent. I did not recognize the garb. And where in the world are your weapons? Who would go out on a hunt with...
Eduarda interrupted her increasingly bewildered tangent.
Church agents rely on different methods. Oh, pardon me. But, can you see anything in that?
She carefully pointed at her blindfold cap, a tricone with a silvery face mask largely obscuring her upper face.
Of course I can. It is a commemorative uniform to honor the great Master Willem,
she said, now being a bit flustered.
Who?
Without it being noticed, she rolled her eyes.
Could you please answer my question? Oh, of course. Elden Chapel. No. That is in a completely different direction. You sure you can Then, what lies in that direction?
She pointed with her shining metal cane towards the right.
Nothing. The town ends there. Ah, yes. I see. Well, I must have gotten turned around then. Sorry to bother you, miss. God bless.
The woman nodded and almost forgot to bless her goodbye before closing the door and locking. She turned back to Edgar, who shook his head after they had stepped back onto the street.
Still nothing. What in the world are they on about?
Not a clue, admittedly. Let's go.
They walked down where, according to the woman, the town ended, to where they knew the School of Mensis was. A fact that everyone else seemed to have forgotten about.
Very strange indeed. I find it hard to believe they have convinced that many people.
She turned her face to him as they walked, with a disapproving sneer.
one can only assume they have. Whether you are steps ahead or behind, you must still calculate each step both taken and yet to come.
Of course, ma'am.
They quickly made a turn off the slightly curving street that ended in a small lookout point down the cliffs. They stepped onto a stone stair that curved downward, with a metal fence separating them from the crowded houses. There they happened upon a desolate, narrow passage running perpendicular to their direction. They walked down to the right for a bit until they turned again, this time ascending a straight staircase of similar design to the prior, emerging on an elevated platform nestled in between the towering houses. 2 benches stood on both sides, their backs against the facade, like an open public balcony with a view over the descending landscape, where the silhouette of the mensis proper lay. Few paths seemed to be accessible due to the terrain, which made many comings and goings quite easy to monitor. Eduarda was bothered frequently by how casually Edgar handled their spying operation. The way he altered his position or how he breathed seemed to her like he tried to passively remark that it was a fool's errand. Her own fervent drive made her able to easily lose track of time. If nothing happened during her vigil, so be it. The thought of not knowing their doings was much more agonizing than simply sitting still, watching the same spot for hours, and seeing how many conducted themselves while on duty. She felt she could not solely rely on their eyes and ears, but had to verify for herself. When nightly darkness blanketed their view, they could only rely on shifts and slight movements in the landscape that now shared more or less the same shade of black. Now and then she broke her sight of the landscape beyond to peer at Edgar. He was, admittedly, one of the more professional ones, as he never moaned or made fruitless small talk when silence was preferable. He sat quietly and looked in the appropriate directions, save for sometimes when she caught him looking at her. He always averted his eyes when she caught him doing it. They both stood up quite abruptly when quick but proficiently quiet footsteps came from the street, then up the steps to their outpost. It was a black church hunter, whom she recognized as one of hers once he turned up his face at her.
Lady Eduarda, you need to come this instance. Obscured characters emerged from Mensis, heading for the cathedral.
What? Why are you here then?
We are searching the entire ward. They just slipped by us. We are alerting everyone.
She sighed.
Very well. Quite good. Continue. I want all eyes turned onto the cathedral. Keep the hunt discreet. But I want every nook of the entire ward cast a light upon, you hear?
He nodded and took off in the same direction he came in.
Come, to the plaza.
You think they'll be out in the open?
They rushed down the stairs and quietly jogged along the narrow passages.
No, they are probably like us. Stick to the shadows and away from the hunt. But we must gather around the cathedral. My gut is telling me they would try to gain entry.
Why? What makes you think Menzies are sending spies?
Because that's what I would do.
At the grand open space in front of the cathedral ascent, some church hunters remained to leisurely patrol the ward. But it appeared, amusingly enough, as if they had simply returned for a break amidst the mortal hunt. They stayed out of their main view and darted past the closed church gate, right in front of the first steps. There she saw another more apparent member of the choir, waving at her from a rise beside the wide steps, before running down to her.
We just saw them. I sent a few fellows down to shadow him. Well? This way.
She led them onward hastily on the street leading away from the round plaza, then turned down a narrow path once the street began to curve left. A church hunter emerged from the shadows behind a pillar on a house exterior, gesturing towards them. The three of them came to a stop before him in the darkened street, where few windows shone. He was holding a lantern.
They met up with another character. Large one. They headed down through the tunnel.
When?
Just recently. They stopped here for a moment.
She and Edgar immediately headed in the direction the man was gesturing in. Down the broad stone steps, into a tunnel beneath an overpass street. In it, their boots echoed against the arching brick walls. They stepped into a narrow alleyway and threw their heads around. Down to the right, at the very end, hunched down and with its back turned to them, was a large character that became even larger once he stood up and his full form was revealed, dressed in a black sheet with a hood covering its face. It turned around and slung a large sack over its shoulder. With the character's length in mind, Eduarda got the impression that there was a person tucked within it. They glared at each other across the silent street, standing completely still, waiting for the other to act. One of its giant bare feet took a slow step towards them, walking hoveringly over the stone street. Eduarda unholstered her rosmarinus from her belt and held it at the ready while Edgar stepped slightly in front of her.
Halt!
He called out. The figure continued 2 more steps towards them before stopping.
State your name and affiliation.
Edgar stepped closer precariously, and Eduarda was forced to follow, so as to not impact him, were she to be forced to fire the silver spray canister. The giant figure held up a hand, like in a half-pray gesture, in front of his chest. In the next moment, the street lit up with blue lightning. Sparks tugged at their clothes, and a dome appeared around the character, within which the 2 of them were violently shoved towards him, like pushed by the space around them. They stumbled forward. Just as she looked up and prepared to fire the canister, another spark lit up directly to her right, prompting her to instinctively leap backwards. Out from a darkened corner, in between the buildings, came a large sphere attached to a handle and surging with blue, heavenly lightning, swinging down at where she had been standing. Wielding the unorthodox mace was a figure draped in heavy robes and a large hood, with the glimmers of a glistening bronze helmet beneath. Otherwise, the attire looked very ragged, but blended well with the darkness of the nightly streets. She clicked the little mechanism at the handle of the cane, which released the steel wire within, transforming it into a whip which she swung upward at the enigmatic hunter. The razor blades on the metal wire she swung at him just missed as he ducked and lunged out into the street, in between them and the giant figure. From the other side of the street came a second character of similar fashion, swinging a mace crackling with blue sparks at Edgar, forcing him to back closer to Eduarda. There was a tense second where they stared at each other before she swung with her whip. Edgar jumped closer to the left wall and transformed his cane. The Black Hunters retaliated by striking out to their sides at nothing, causing the maces to ignite with blue lightning. One ducked Eduarda's whip and lunged in towards her with a side swipe. Due to how he jumped, the blow likely impacted weaker than it could have. The metal sphere struck her upper right leg. A jolting numbness instantly coursed down her leg and up her side, causing the leg to tense and fold itself. She fell on her knee, striking away the mace with the handle of the cane. He turned and swung around to bring it down at her head, but Edgar intercepted the strike with his cane, now returned to the stiff, inconspicuous cane blade. The stun had only been a brief pulse through her body, however potent, and she had regained full control. She stepped back, still on her knees, and held up the Rosmarinus towards them. Edgar quickly glanced back at her, swiped with his cane towards the attacker's feet while jumping backwards. She pulled the trigger, and a little wheel started spinning at the tip, emitting a subtle but prominent sound of arias as the glittering mist spread out towards their opponent. They both stepped back at the glorious appearance, puzzled by the calm attack. Her attacker foolishly advanced through the mist, striking his mace towards the side to conjure the lightning. Watching him dart towards her made her smirk. The mist was not dense enough to obscure him, and she watched him stumble in front of her. He slapped his right shoulder as if bitten by a bug. Then he dropped his weapon. His legs gave way and he slumped forward, trying to support himself with his arms, but those too failed him. At first he let out an angry grunt before hitting the ground, his helmet clanging against the stone. The groan increased into a pained plea as he likely wanted to flail around to ward off the arcane mist that was eating away at his body. But with his bodily capabilities rapidly failing him, he only managed a jerking motion with his hand towards her before becoming completely still, with a stuttering sigh escaping him. The mist receded, and they saw the remaining figure quickly turn heels and run down the alley, taking a different direction than that of the tall robed figure from before. They sprinted after, and Eduarda shouted to Edgar.
After him!
She threw herself around the corner in the direction of the vanished kidnapper, while Edgar continued forward after the Black Hunter. She flew down a small set of stairs in the narrow alley, then scraped against the wall as it turned sharply. It led to a dead-end square with a water pump situated on a small grass plot in the center. All the doors around the space was closed except for one. Thinking on her feet, she was forced to enter into a large hall with a staircase on the left, seemingly being a lobby of some sort that she had entered the back door into. Straight ahead over a carpeted floor was another open set of double doors. She darted past a counter desk directly below the staircase and several assorted shelves on the opposite wall, onward and out into a much wider main street. Devastatingly, it lay completely void of people in all directions. The pleading statues holding street lanterns shone onto the scene, as well as the moon. She looked in both directions as she stepped out further, left clueless where that vile man had taken his dubious sack of people. Within these very halls, our goddess is near. Oscar stood firm and calm behind the altar in the lesser chapel of the upper cathedral ward, the common gathering place for the orphans taken under their wing. Occupying the benches in front of him were the students of the orphanage, ending their first term of the church tutelage. Diligent studies will further your perception of the divine. With that said, while your term may be over, I encourage you to not frolic too much away from your duties. I hope you realize that when you put faith in the goddess, she puts equal measure of faith in you. That you will succeed in your goals. That you will study hard and be rewarded. With us, here in the church, you have the opportunity to further establish this bridge of trust with her. For one day she may choose to personally speak with you, to tell you of your destiny each. Oh, but I must have talked your ears off by now. The goddess would not want your young spirits to be bored, now would she? Out with you all. Enjoy the beautiful day. But keep in mind who has given it unto you. They jumped from the benches, and their tiny feet hurried out in between them. While they maintained a neat dual line while walking, their excitement was not properly contained, and the closer they reached the chapel exit, the quicker they moved at a more disorganized pace. It made him smile, remembering his own departure so long ago now, that suddenly did not seem so distant. He walked away from the chapel, but was made to hesitate when he heard light steps behind him. He turned around and saw 3 little girls, having lingered after the departure of the class.
Master Oscar,
The blonde Amelia began, then nervously shifted her feet in place.
May we have a moment of your time?
Of course, girls. I always have time to spare for you. She smiled, the hesitation blowing off her.
We made something for you. It was our application assignment.
Ah, for the advanced term. Yes, I remember. She looked back at the twin sisters, Krana and Yosefka, who looked between each other before Yosefka handed a little bell towards him. Oh my! For me? Well, this is a beautiful piece. He took it. His praise was not exaggerated the slightest. It was made with the same proficient, decorative metallurgy seasoned researchers were capable of. When he rang it gently, the sound was very well balanced. I'm sure the goddess herself can hear this beautiful tone. You must be excited to continue your studies. They all smiled the same eager smile.
Yes, yes. And to meet her one day.
Amelia skipped with delight. I'm confident you will. Such bright minds. But now off with you. Enjoy yourself before the splendorous work continues. I'll be looking forward to working with you three. They curtsied very neatly before running away to the door. He watched them leave, then examined the bell in his hand. He put it in his pocket and proceeded in through a side door, taking him into the main orphanage building. 2 choir members awaited him in the corridor beyond, and walked with him as he continued towards the back of the building. We have the Blood Saint's report, Master Oscar. Ah, and? No significant change. No physical symptoms, nor any prominent signs of further development. In short, it behaves like it should. Like proper holy blood. Very good. Then implement it to the research hall. And start the process of dominant development? I believe we have all the necessary information by now. He stopped before opening a door and turned to them. They looked at one another through their blindfold caps. I would believe so, Master. Good. Then it's time to properly begin. Start the distribution of blood. No longer will the ministers be the exclusive source. Certainly. The new permits have already been made. We have removed the academic requirements. Only the purpose of distribution is what matters. Very good. The blood of the goddess must be let to flow freely, facilitated by us all. He continued on through, out to one of the smaller gardens, and proceeded to their main research facility of the upper ward. How fortunate, wouldn't you say? One of them commented from behind. That the saints gain a renewed holy purpose, despite their past failings. Almost like they truly were the gods chosen from the beginning, Oscar replied. Now they can bring the proper salvation of a true goddess blood, truly saving the people through communion. Shall we also start administering the serum to the new generation as well, Master? He stopped, hearing how their steps had to abruptly do the same. He glanced to the side, through the arches separating the walkway with a garden of mostly bushes. A fountain was in the middle of a four-way path, the patches of greenery in the corners. I believe it's time, yes, to truly elevate our youth. The blessing of our fair maiden must reach her children as early as possible, to share her blood, like a true mother would her child.
Great is chalice. A chalice that breaks a labyrinth seal. Great chalices unlock deeper reaches of the labyrinth. The Great East chalice became the cornerstone of the choir, the elite delegation of the healing church. It was also the first great chalice brought back to the surface since the time of Bergenworth, and allowed the choir to have audience with Ebrietas.